The restaurant never slept, it only changed its rhythm. By the time Harry pushed open the heavy back door for the first time, the kitchen was already alive. Not alive in a gentle way, but in a fierce, breathing chaos. Steel clanged against steel. Knives struck cutting boards in sharp, practiced beats. Flames leapt under pans, sending waves of heat into the narrow space. Steam curled upward like smoke from a battlefield. Harry paused just inside the doorway. The heat hit him first, then the noise, then the smell: oil, garlic, meat, sweat, ambition. He adjusted the sleeves of his simple shirt, the fabric already sticking to his skin. At 25, he carried himself quietly, like someone who had learned early that survival came from staying unnoticed. His clothes were clean but worn, his shoes cheap but polished. There was nothing flashy about him, yet something about his presence slowed the air around him. "New waiter?" someone barked without looking up. "Yes," Harry replied, voice calm, respectful. He stepped forward, careful not to get in anyone's way, eyes taking everything in. This wasn't just a job to him. It was money, stability, a chance to breathe a little easier. What Harry didn't know was that the moment he stepped under the harsh white kitchen lights, someone else noticed him too. Thomas. From the other side of the kitchen, behind a long stainless steel counter, Thomas was in his element. At 32, he moved with authority, controlled, sharp, precise. His hands worked automatically, guiding the kitchen like a conductor leads an orchestra. Every command was short, every movement intentional, and then his eyes lifted. Just for a second. That was all it took. The new waiter stood slightly apart from the others, listening more than speaking. His posture was straight but unforced. His face, calm, focused, naturally striking without arrogance. Sweat beaded at his temple, catching the light. Thomas didn't stare. He never stared. He simply noticed. And then he looked away. "Table 12, 2 pastas, move," Thomas said, voice steady, professional. The kitchen surged forward again, but something subtle had shifted. As Harry began his first shift, he felt the pressure of the place immediately. Plates burned his palms. Orders came fast. Mistakes weren't tolerated. Yet no one raised their voice at him unnecessarily. He worked hard, stayed quiet, and learned quickly. Every now and then he felt it. Presence. Not heavy, not threatening, just aware. When he passed the prep station, Thomas's eyes followed him for a fraction of a second, never long enough to be obvious. When Harry leaned in to grab plates, Thomas stepped back, giving him space. Space, always control. Their eyes met once. Just once. It wasn't dramatic. No sparks, no smiles. Just a brief, measured glance. Two men assessing something they didn't yet have words for. Harry looked away first, chalking it up to nerves. New job, new pressure. Thomas returned to his work, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He had seen attraction before, felt it, buried it. This was different. The knives kept moving. The steam kept rising. Orders flew in and out like gunfire. The kitchen roared on, unaware that something quiet had begun beneath its noise. That night, as Harry clocked out, exhausted but relieved, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not excitement, not fear, anticipation. From across the kitchen, Thomas watched him leave, only until the door closed. Then he exhaled. Control, he reminded himself. Always control. And somewhere between the heat of the stoves and the cold shine of steel, the story began, without a word spoken, without a line crossed, but with eyes that had already said too much. By the third week, the kitchen no longer felt foreign to Harry. The noise had become familiar. The heat, expected. His hands moved faster now, more confident, balancing plates without thinking, slipping between bodies and counters like he belonged there. He kept his head down, did his job, and earned quiet nods of approval from the staff. Still, there was something he couldn't quite place. It wasn't said out loud. It wasn't written on any schedule. But he felt it. Whenever Harry stepped into the kitchen, the space around him seemed to shift. Subtle, almost imagined. A pause. A recalculation. like the room was adjusting its breathing. Thomas never hovered. If anything, he kept his distance. Yet somehow, Harry always found himself closer to him than planned. "Harry," Thomas said one evening, not looking up from his station, "stay near the past tonight. You're quick." It sounded like a compliment. Professional. Earned. Harry nodded. "Yes, chef." The words felt normal. Safe. And yet, standing near the pass meant standing within Thomas's orbit, close enough to hear his breath between commands, close enough to feel the heat from his body mixing with the heat of the stoves. Nothing happened. That was the unsettling part. No wandering hands. No inappropriate words. No tone that crossed a line. Thomas corrected him when needed, praised him when deserved, and otherwise treated him like any other staff member. Almost. Late shifts became more frequent. "We're short tonight," Thomas said once, eyes still on the tickets. "I need you to stay." Another time, "You're learning fast. I'll train you on drinks after close." Responsibility followed. Small promotions in trust. Better sections. Longer hours. Harry told himself it was simple. He worked hard. Thomas noticed. That was how jobs worked. Still, there were moments, quiet ones, that lingered longer than they should have. A glance held half a second too long before sliding away. Thomas stepping just slightly closer when explaining something, then immediately stepping back. A hand hovering in the air, as if about to point, then retreating. Harry felt safe. That was undeniable. If Thomas had wanted to cross a line, he could have. The power imbalance was obvious. But he never used it, never tested it, never even hinted. And somehow, that restraint unsettled Harry more than boldness ever could have. One night, as they wiped down counters after closing, the kitchen was nearly empty. The chaos replaced by a low hum of exhaust fans and the faint clink of metal being stacked away. "You're doing well here," Thomas said, breaking the silence. Harry looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Thank you, chef." Thomas nodded once. "If you want more hours, you'll get them." Harry hesitated. "I appreciate that." For a moment, neither of them moved. The light reflected off the steel counters, sharp and cold, catching in Thomas's eyes. Harry noticed then how tired he looked. Not weak, just worn. Human. The realization hit him unexpectedly. Thomas wasn't watching him like an object. He was watching him like a man watching something he didn't allow himself to touch. The thought made Harry uncomfortable and curious. That night, walking home under flickering streetlights, Harry tried to shake the feeling. He had grown up learning to read danger quickly. This wasn't danger. It was something quieter, something patient, something that made him feel seen without being claimed. And that was what disturbed him the most, because safety should have felt simple. But with Thomas, safety came with questions Harry wasn't ready to ask. The night unraveled faster than anyone expected. Orders flooded in all at once. Tickets piling up like accusations, printers screaming without mercy. The kitchen turned feral. Heat pressed down hard, thick and unforgiving. Sweat soaked through shirts. Voices sharpened. Plates flew. Harry barely had time to think. Runner. Behind. Table 6 now. He moved on instinct, feet aching, arms burning, mind locked into survival mode. The restaurant was full, the kind of full that felt endless, as if the doors would never close and the night would never release them. Thomas stood at the center of it all, controlled, commanding, unbreakable. His voice cut through the chaos with precision, never wasted, never raised more than necessary. Watching him work was like watching fire contained in steel. By the time the last ticket was called, it was close to midnight. One by one, staff clocked out. Some exhausted, some frustrated, all relieved. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed. The roar of the kitchen softened into something almost peaceful. Harry wiped down his station, shoulders heavy. He reached for his jacket when Thomas spoke. "Harry." It wasn't sharp. It wasn't an order. It was measured. "We're behind on prep for tomorrow," Thomas said. "If you're able to stay a bit longer, I'd appreciate it." Harry hesitated. His body begged him to leave. But the thought of extra hours, extra money, overruled the fatigue. "I can stay," he said. Thomas met his eyes just briefly. "Thank you." They worked in near silence. No rush now, just the scrape of knives, the low hum of refrigeration, the city breathing faintly beyond the walls. The kitchen felt different at night, larger, quieter, honest. After a while, Thomas set his knife down. "You eaten?" he asked. Harry blinked. "Not really." Thomas considered him for a moment, then nodded toward the stove. "Sit. I'll make something quick." "I don't want to be a problem." "You're not." The firmness in his voice ended the argument. They ate at a small prep table, shoulders not quite touching. The food was simple, warm, comforting, real. Harry hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite loosened something in his chest. For a few minutes, they said nothing. Then Thomas spoke, eyes fixed on his plate. "This place gets loud," he said quietly. "But it doesn't get full." Harry glanced at him. "What do you mean?" Thomas exhaled slowly, as if deciding whether to continue. "You can be surrounded by people all night," he said, "and still go home alone." The words landed heavier than expected. Harry nodded. He understood that kind of loneliness, the kind that didn't announce itself, the kind that sat beside you and waited. "I know that feeling," Harry said. Thomas looked up then, surprised. Not because Harry answered, but because he answered honestly. For the first time since Harry had started, they weren't chef and waiter. They were just two men sitting in the quiet aftermath of a long night. "I chose this life," Thomas said after a moment. "The hours, the pressure. I'm good at it. But it doesn't leave much room for anything else." Harry listened. He didn't rush to respond. He never had. "My family depends on me," Harry said finally. "So I don't think much about anything beyond work either." Their eyes met. This time, neither looked away. There was no tension in the air, only understanding. Shared exhaustion. Shared silence. When they stood to clean up, something had shifted. Not forward, not backward, just deeper. As Harry gathered his things to leave, Thomas spoke again. "Thank you for staying tonight." Harry nodded. "Anytime." He stepped into the night air, cool against his overheated skin, his mind heavier than his body. For the first time, he didn't walk home thinking about money. He walked home thinking about a man who had everything under control, except his loneliness. And without realizing it, Harry had stepped closer to a story neither of them could turn away from now. Something changed after that night. Not in a way that could be pointed at or explained, but in the quiet spaces between moments. Harry began to notice it in the smallest details. The way his shoulders relaxed when he stepped into the kitchen and heard Thomas's voice. The way the chaos felt more manageable when Thomas was nearby, directing it with calm authority. It unsettled him. Harry had never questioned himself like this before. Life had always been simple. Work hard, stay focused, don't get distracted. Feelings were luxuries he couldn't afford. And yet, without meaning to, he had started measuring his days by Thomas's presence. Why does he make things feel steady? The thought crept in uninvited and refused to leave. One evening, the kitchen emptied earlier than usual. A rare calm settled over the space, broken only by the soft hiss of cooling stoves. Harry stayed behind to help clean, moving slower now, aware in a way he hadn't been before. Thomas stood beside him at the sink, sleeves rolled up, forearms tense as he scrubbed a pan. The overhead lights reflected off water and steel, casting sharp lines across both of them. They worked in silence, a comfortable silence. Harry reached for a towel at the same moment Thomas did. Their hands came close enough for Harry to feel the warmth of him, close enough to notice the faint roughness of Thomas's skin. Almost. Time stretched thin. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to that inch of air between their hands. Harry's breath caught, not because of fear but because of awareness. Then Thomas pulled back. Immediately, decisively. "Sorry," he said, though nothing had touched. Harry shook his head. "It's fine." But it wasn't. Something had cracked. Not open, but enough to let light through. Harry turned away, pretending to focus on his task, heart beating harder than it should have. He tried to name the feeling and failed. It wasn't desire, not fully. It wasn't panic either. It was possibility, and that scared him. Thomas felt it too. The moment lingered in his mind like a fault line he'd stepped too close to. He had built his life on discipline, on restraint. He knew exactly what that near touch meant, and exactly why he couldn't allow it. Desire was easy. Crossing the line was not. They finished cleaning without another word. No apologies. No explanations. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy, saying everything neither of them could. When Harry finally left the kitchen, he paused at the door, hand resting on the frame. He looked back once, just once. Thomas stood alone under the lights, hands braced on the counter, jaw tight, eyes distant. Grounded. That was the word. Harry stepped out into the night, the door closing softly behind him, his thoughts louder than the city around him. He had never questioned who he was, until now, and somewhere inside him, the wall he'd built to keep life simple had begun to fracture. Not enough to fall, but enough to make him wonder what was on the other side. The night refused to let Harry rest. Sleep came in fragments, short, uneasy stretches broken by thoughts he didn't want to finish. Thomas's voice, the almost touch, the way the kitchen felt quieter when he wasn't there. By the time dawn threatened the edges of the sky, Harry knew one thing with certainty. Avoiding this would only make it worse. When he returned to the restaurant later that evening, the air felt different, tighter, like both of them were walking around something sharp. Near closing, Thomas asked him to stay back again. "Just for a minute," he said. "Not an order, a request." They stood near the prep table, the kitchen mostly dark now, lights dimmed to a low glow. The silence wasn't comfortable this time, it waited. Thomas didn't speak right away. He looked at the floor, then at his hands, as if grounding himself before lifting his eyes to Harry. "I need to say something," he said. "And before I do, know this, you don't owe me anything." Harry's stomach tightened. "I'm your chef," Thomas continued, voice steady but low. "And because of that, I've been careful. I will continue to be careful. This isn't an expectation. It's not pressure." He paused. "I'm attracted to you." The words were simple, clean, unavoidable. "I didn't choose it," Thomas said. "And I don't expect anything from you. I just couldn't keep pretending you hadn't noticed." Harry felt the world tilt. His first instinct was anger. Not loud, not explosive, but sharp and defensive. "You shouldn't have let this happen," he said. "You're my boss." "I know," Thomas replied immediately. "That's why this ends here unless you want it to exist at all." Harry ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, breath uneven. "I'm not," he stopped, restarted. "I've never been with a man. I didn't come here for this." "I understand," Thomas said. "Completely." That made it worse. The respect, the restraint. "You make me question things I've never questioned before," Harry said, voice tight. "And I don't like that." Thomas nodded, accepting it without argument. "That's fair." Silence stretched between them, thick and raw. "I won't treat you differently," Thomas said. "I won't put you in uncomfortable situations. If you want distance, you'll have it. If you want to quit, I'll give you a reference." Harry stopped pacing. "That's not what I want," he said quietly. Thomas looked up, hope flickering before he could stop it, then carefully burying itself again. "I just need space," Harry said. "To think. To breathe." "You have it," Thomas said at once. Harry grabbed his jacket, his movements quick, restless. At the door, he turned back, emotions warring across his face. Confusion, fear, something dangerously close to longing. "This is where most stories end," Harry said, almost to himself. Thomas watched him go, chest tight, heart disciplined into stillness. The door closed, and neither of them knew it yet, but this wasn't an ending. It was the moment everything real began. The days that followed stretched longer than they should have. Harry kept his distance exactly as he said he would. He arrived, did his work, left on time. No late shifts, No quiet conversations after close. If Thomas was at the pass, Harry stayed on the other side of the room. If their paths crossed, it was brief, professional, clean, too clean. Outside the restaurant, the city felt heavier. Rain came without warning, soaking the streets, blurring the lights into long, trembling lines. Harry walked home through it more than once, jacket pulled tight, thoughts louder than the traffic. He told himself he missed the routine, the structure, the stability, but that wasn't the truth. He missed Thomas, not the chef, the man. He missed the calm in his voice during chaos, the way the kitchen felt grounded when Thomas was there, the rare softness in his eyes when the night slowed and masks slipped. It angered him. Harry had never been confused about who he was. Attraction had always been simple, unquestioned. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to be part of his story. And yet, memory flashed uninvited. Thomas standing under harsh lights, sleeves rolled up, the almost touch at the sink, the honesty in his voice when he spoke about loneliness. Harry stopped walking once, rain pouring down around him, breath caught in his chest. Why doesn't this feel like betrayal? That was the question he couldn't silence. He wasn't becoming someone else. He wasn't losing himself. If anything, he felt more aware, more present than he ever had before. As if something dormant had been named, not created. Attraction didn't erase who he was. It expanded it. The realization terrified him. Back at the restaurant, he caught Thomas watching him once, just once, from across the kitchen. There was no expectation in his eyes. No demand. Only distance. Respect. It made Harry's chest ache. He understood then that Thomas had kept his word completely. And somehow that hurt more than if he hadn't. Late one night, Harry stood at the bus stop, rain misting the air, replaying the same thought over and over. If this meant nothing, why did walking away feel like loss? He looked down at his hands, flexed them slowly, grounding himself. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice waiting to be made. And for the first time in his life, Harry realized the wall he had built around certainty wasn't protecting him. It was holding him back. The streets glistened under passing headlights, memories rising and fading like reflections in water. Distance had given him clarity, and clarity was leading him somewhere he could no longer pretend he didn't see. Harry didn't rush back. That mattered. When he finally did, it wasn't because he missed the noise of the kitchen or the weight of a full shift. It was because the answer had settled quietly inside him, steady and unmistakable. He came back as a man who had decided, not reacted. The restaurant was busy when he arrived, the familiar heat and motion wrapping around him like an old coat. For a moment, everything felt exactly the same. Then Thomas saw him. No surprise crossed his face. No relief. No expectation. Just calm attention like he had been prepared for either outcome. Near the end of the night, Harry waited until the kitchen slowed. He stepped closer to the pass, heart steady, voice clear. "Can we talk?" he asked. Thomas nodded once. Of course. They stood apart, not hiding but not touching. The distance between them felt intentional now, not empty. "I've been thinking," Harry said, "about what you said, about what I felt." Thomas listened. He always had. "I'm not ready to be anything," Harry continued. "Not publicly. Not quickly. And I don't want my job tied to this in a way that hurts either of us." "That's fair," Thomas said immediately. Harry met his eyes. "If this happens at all, it has to be slow. Equal. No pressure. And if at any point I say stop, it stops." Thomas didn't hesitate. "Yes. No bargaining. No disappointment. Just respect." "I won't use my position," Thomas added. "And if you ever feel like I am, you tell me. Or you walk away." Harry exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. "This isn't me changing who I am," Harry said. "It's me being honest about what I feel." Thomas's voice softened. "That's all I would ever want." They didn't touch. That was the choice. They returned to work, side by side but separate, something fragile and intentional forming between them. No stolen glances this time. No silent tension. Just awareness. Over the next weeks, they started where most people end, talking. Short conversations. Shared meals after close. Long pauses where nothing needed to be said. When their hands finally touched, it wasn't accidental. It was agreed. A brief contact. A grounding presence. No rush to claim more. And in that slowness, something solid grew. Not fantasy. Not escape. Connection. For the first time, Harry didn't feel pulled or pushed. He felt chosen and choosing in return. Thomas felt it too. The rare balance of desire met with consent, authority dissolved into equality. This wasn't the kind of love that burned fast and disappeared. It was the kind that stayed. And as the kitchen lights dimmed one night and they stood together in the quiet aftermath, Harry understood the truth of it. Coming back hadn't been a risk. It had been an arrival. What grew between them didn't need a name. That was the first thing Harry understood. There was no announcement, no sudden shift the world could point to and say this is where it happened. Their days continued much the same. Long hours, shared glances, quiet conversations after close. The kitchen remained loud, demanding, unforgiving. But within it, something gentle had taken root. They didn't rush. When Thomas reached for Harry's hand, it was never in public, never careless. When Harry leaned into him, it was because he wanted to, not because he felt pulled. They learned each other in pauses and patience, in respect that didn't need proof. Some nights, they sat together after everyone left, shoulders close but not touching, sharing food in comfortable silence. Other nights, they walked the same streets in opposite directions, knowing the connection didn't weaken just because space existed. Harry stopped trying to explain himself. He wasn't rewriting his past. He wasn't erasing anything. He was adding a truth he hadn't known he was missing. Thomas, in turn, learned how to want without claiming, how to be close without control. For the first time in years, he felt seen not for his authority, but for his presence. What they shared wasn't loud. It was steady, and that steadiness became its own kind of intimacy. The night it finally settled, fully, quietly, they stood outside the restaurant as the last light clicked off behind them. The city breathed around them, indifferent and alive. Harry looked at Thomas, then at the familiar door he had once walked through with nothing but survival on his mind. "I didn't come here looking for this," Harry said. Thomas smiled, small and genuine. "Neither did I." Harry nodded, feeling the weight of the journey settle into something warm. "I came here to earn a living," he said. "I stayed because I found myself." Thomas didn't answer with words. He didn't need to, because some stories don't end with passion or promises. They end with belonging, and that, they both knew, was enough.